start the recording. So so we are going to answer your questions about not only why you might do a research experience in the summer overall, but also why ours will be something that will be useful for you. And we'll have lots of time for Q&A afterward. If you have questions while I'm talking, feel free to drop them in the chat so you won't forget them, and then we'll try to get them as much as we can. So we are going to basically answer 3 questions in this presentation today. We're going to talk about what a PhD in political science is. Why might you want one? What does it mean? And why would it be something that you would want to consider? And then we're going to do a section on how you can prepare now if you are trying to get to a graduate degree. So if your ultimate goal is to do a PhD in political science, or if you are wanting to do some sort of political science related research career, then there are some suggestions that we can make for what you can do while you're still an undergraduate to set you up for success in that way. And then we're going to talk specifically about the REU program that will be held at Vanderbilt, to talk about how it can help prepare you for that kind of trajectory. So what is a PhD in political science? So political science is the study of government, political actors, and systems of power. And sometimes that's international government, it's international organizations, it's domestic actors, domestic processes, domestic institutions, and all of those things. But it's questions of how different kinds of actors assert power over an area, or over a thing, or over other people. And so if you're not a political science major, you're still welcome to go into a political science career and join REU, but the topic is on political science. So there are 3 areas of political science that people generally bundle their interests into, although they're not mutually exclusive. The first is American politics, or the study of US institutions like Congress, the courts, the presidency. I see Professor Lincoln is on this call, and he studies the courts and law and how they are political entities. It's also the study of the behavior and opinions of the American public, right? How voters think. Do they vote? Do they show up? Do they dissent? Those kinds of questions. Comparative politics is about the comparative analysis of political institutions, actors, and outcomes. So typically, if you're studying other countries and their political institutions or their political behaviors, whether that's Latin America, Asia, Europe, Africa, you're usually falling under comparative politics. And then there's international relations, which is the study of how countries interact with and relate to one another, and with international organizations and some subnational entities. So sometimes we're looking at how domestic politics affects international outcomes. So those are generally the 3 areas of political science that different kinds of questions can fall into, and our program addresses all of them. But if you're interested in any of them, political science might be a good option for you. So a PhD in political science is a Doctor of Philosophy degree. It involves training to conduct research and to teach at the college level in political science. So whether you're interested in teaching or in research, you get to do both through the process of a PhD. You learn to develop theories to answer questions in political science, things that bother you when you're debating with your friends or that you don't understand when it's happening in the world around you. We develop theories to answer those questions, and we test those theories through some sort of systematic analysis, whether that's case studies or interviews or survey analysis or analysis of data collection, etc. So how do I get a PhD in political science? Generally, it's a 5 to 6 year doctoral program in political science. So you would apply for a doctorate or a doctoral program, and they generally take 5 to 6 years. When you are admitted to a doctoral program, most of the time your tuition is fully funded with a living stipend provided. So whereas when you go to get your master's degree, you generally have to pay the tuition for that master's degree. When you get into a doctoral program, most of the time, doctoral programs will pay for you to go to school. They'll pay your tuition and they'll pay a living stipend. It's not like a huge one, but it is to cover living expenses. The idea there is that it's a job, it's a full-time job, and they're expecting you to treat it like a job. And so they're going to pay you an actual living stipend to do that. I will say that there are some programs that are pay to play, right? That you might be asked to pay your own way through graduate school. Generally, those programs are not, your degree is going to be not useful enough to be able to pay those debts back. So I would be very careful if your options in front of you are requiring you to pay. Those funding packages generally require you to teach or to be a research assistant or both for the program that you are involved in. And you do have to have a bachelor's degree to apply to doctoral programs, but you don't have to have a master's degree. It's not required, and it may or may not give you any kind of particular advantage when applying for a doctoral degree. And then once you're in a doctoral program, you'll do 2 or 3 years of coursework, and you'll learn new methods of how to do social science. And then you'll generate a capstone project. So you'll generate a dissertation or a couple of large articles that are a fundamental shaping of what you are interested in and what you have become the expert in. Okay, so some courses that you'll take while you're getting a PhD is things like research design, courses on political institutions, things about race and racism as relative to politics, right? Race and racism in voting, in representation, in the law, in violence, etc. Political parties, political behavior, or how voters or everyday people act when it comes to politics. Conflict and violence, whether that's interstate wars, civil wars, political violence, police violence, those kinds of things. Human rights, and you'll also take methodology courses, so courses that teach you how to use evidence to make claims in social science. Those can be statistics, surveys, experiments, field research, game theory, network analysis, lots of different kinds of options that are right there. And why would you want to get one? So what can you actually do with a PhD in political science? Well, you could be a professor at a college or university. You could work for a government agency like the State Department or the Congressional Research Service, which is associated with the Library of Congress. You could work for think tanks that make policy recommendations and do program and effectiveness analysis and make recommendations on policy and strategy. You could work for a survey firm, especially one that does kind of election polling, whether that's in the United States or elsewhere. You could work for nonprofit organizations that need research support. There's a director of research, for instance, for Amnesty International, and they do a lot of analysis and comparison as to how states are changing over time with their human rights practices. You can do political consulting. You could work for international organizations, whether that's development organizations or UN-related organizations or NGOs. And you can also do other private industry jobs like working for Meta, working for Amazon Research, etc. So what is particularly useful from a PhD perspective is that we teach you how to do science and scientific analysis. So we're teaching you how to use evidence to draw a conclusion in a way that's really useful for some organizations that need researchers, and not just people who can understand data, but people who can analyze it and design experiments and design studies to figure out how best to analyze situations and make recommendations. So if this is a direction that you're interested in going, whether it's a PhD or something that's a similarly research-centered career, what can you do now to prepare for it, now that you're in undergrad? So you need a bachelor's degree in any major. You don't have to have a PhD, a master, I'm sorry. You don't have to have a bachelor's in political science in order to get into a political science doctoral program. You just have to have a bachelor's degree. You're going to want to write you'll have to write a statement of purpose that explains why you want to get a PhD and why you want to do it at the place that you're applying to. You'll need a resume, or what we call a curriculum vitae, or CV. You'll need to submit your transcript from your undergrad institution, or multiple if you transferred. Sometimes you're required to submit GRE scores with your application. Not everywhere requires that, and in fact, quite a few places are no longer requiring them. So before you invest in taking the GRE, you might want to look into whether the places that you want to apply even require it. You'll need to get letters of recommendation from faculty. Basically, you want letters from people who know you as in terms of your research potential. Like, what is it that would make you a really strong researcher and therefore successful in a doctoral program? And you'll usually have to write a writing sample. And again, that doesn't have to be a political science writing sample, but it needs to be able to show that you have analytical ability, right? That you have that you're a good writer and that you can be a critical thinker when it comes to topics that you're trying to answer. So I'm the director of graduate studies here at Vanderbilt. And so I see a lot of applications, and we go through this process of admissions every year. And so I want to talk a little bit about what admissions committees are actually looking for in those things that you're submitting. So they're looking for you to have a passion for research and political science. And what I mean by that is, do you have burning questions that are bugging you all the time? Do you see puzzles in the world that need solving? When you're thinking about politics, are you not just thinking about what's going to happen next, but why is it that people make the choices that they do? Why is it that we're seeing the kind of behaviors that we see? Why are these institutions created in a way that makes them seem very weak? Those kinds of questions, right? And we also are looking for another way that you might show that passion for research is that you tend to compare things to try to understand them, right? That's a scientific way of looking at evidence, is through comparison. We are generally looking for a connection between student interest. So I'm sorry, doctoral admissions committees are generally looking for connections between student interest and faculty expertise. And that doesn't mean that there's a faculty member that asks exactly the same question that you do, but the research strengths of the program are similar to what you are interested in. So for instance, Vanderbilt has a large group of faculty that all study conflict and violence in one way or another. And so if you have questions that are about conflict or violence, no matter whether there's a perfect match in our department, you would be well off to apply to Vanderbilt because there's lots of people who could work with you. Similarly, for the study of the bureaucracy or political behavior or Latin American politics, right? There's a lot of really, there are groups of faculty that are interested in the area that you're interested in, then that's going to be a good fit for you. If you're interested in judicial politics, Vanderbilt's not a great place for you because we don't have very many people who do that. So that's kind of what we mean by that connection. We'd like to see that you have done experience conducting research. And that could be independent research, whether you've done an honors thesis or something that you have done your own research project. Or if you have done research with a faculty member, whether that's assisting them on their project, collecting data for them. You could also get experience conducting research for an organization, like maybe you work for somebody over the summer and that organization does research, does analysis, does critical thinking and writes reports and briefs. Or you can do research in your classes, and that could be the example of research that you bring to the table. We're looking for your capacity for comparative analysis of evidence. So we want to make sure that you're going to do well in a program that asks you to rigorously look at evidence. And so the kinds of things we might look for in your application are things like whether you've taken classes in statistics, in math, in the natural sciences, in economics. So those would be examples where you've used evidence to think critically about things, but they're not the only ways. We also look for things like you've used case studies in your honors thesis, or maybe you did examination of evidence volunteering for somebody. Or maybe you've done logical inquiry, like you've done legal analysis. Maybe you worked as a paralegal for for somebody over the summer, and that gave you a chance to think through critical arguments and do some comparative analysis. So that capacity for comparative analysis can be demonstrated in lots of different ways. And those are things you could think about as you're selecting your courses. We also are generally looking for a potential to thrive in a PhD program. So are you going to seek and respond to mentorship? Have you looked for mentors and grown through working with them? Do you have a willingness to learn and to adapt when you get things wrong, or when you find a new way that you could address something? And are you critical and creative? I think the way that I represented the fact that I was critical, capable of critical analysis when I applied for grad school is that I had a history in debate, right? I did a debate team when I was an undergrad, and that allowed me to demonstrate that I could, develop new arguments and critique existing ones, and impact those arguments and so forth. And so there are lots of ways to demonstrate that as well. So those are the kinds of things that admissions committees are generally looking for when they're looking through PhD applicants. And so the way that you can do those things and demonstrate that you have those characteristics are by choosing courses that would allow you to do that comparative analysis. You can take methods courses. You could also even take graduate level courses if they are offered at your institution, and if that program will allow it. You can conduct research projects, whether that is your own, or you can ask around to see if professors need help with their research projects. You can work or volunteer in political adjacent or research organizations. You can also attend research conferences, right? You can attend political science conferences, which happen all over the country. There's a lot of regional conferences, so you can see what it's like to be a PhD student, and you can see how other PhD students present their work. And REUs, or research experiences for undergraduates, provide a lot of these kinds of opportunities, right? So they provide skills preparation, they provide opportunities to work on research projects, to volunteer for people, to see how conferences work. And so summer research opportunities can be ways to prepare for graduate school and put together a really great application, even if you don't have those opportunities in your undergraduate institution. And let's talk for a minute about what an REU is, and then I'm going to turn it over to Liz to talk about ours specifically. So an REU is a research experience for undergraduates. They're often held in the summer, although not exclusively. Most of the time they are held in the summer, and they're funded by the National Science Foundation to provide lots of opportunities for people to do research, even when they don't have the opportunities in their own institutions for whatever reason. So they're programs for undergraduates to actively participate in independent and collaborative research projects. So if you apply for an REU in physics, you'll work in a physics lab for 8 weeks. If you apply for an REU in political science, you'll do political science research for 8 weeks. So students receive training to develop research skills. So you don't have to have any research skills coming into one. They're funded by the NSF, which means that they will cover your ability to do it, so that you don't have to feel like you can't work over the summer in order to do this organization. And different REU programs focus on different types of research, whether that's psychology or chemistry or engineering, or in our case, political science. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Zechmeister.
All right, in this section of the presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the REU program that we are launching here at Vanderbilt University. And I want to start by talking about the 3 core objectives of our REU program, which are common to most REU programs. So the first is to provide a mentored research experience for every participant. The second is to build students' knowledge, interests, and skills with respect to political science research. And the third is to prepare and support students interested in research-oriented careers. So as Professor Ritter said, the specific area that the REU is focused on will vary, conditional on the REU. Ours is a political science REU, but these core objectives remain the same across different REUs. We accomplish these 3 goals through an on-site 8-week summer program at Vanderbilt University. Vanderbilt is located in Nashville, Tennessee, and the REU program is located within the political science department at the university. For this coming summer, the program dates are June 5th to July 28th. Now, the support from the National Science Foundation permits us to support students' travel, housing on campus, and basic living expenses. Students who participate in the program are engaged in several ways. They are engaged as a cohort who participate in group instruction and group activities, and as individuals who are mentored by faculty through independent research projects and in collaboration on faculty research projects. Our REU has 4 main research areas. They span the 3 empirical sub areas of political science that Professor Ritter spoke about earlier. These research areas reflect core strengths among the faculty in the political science department at Vanderbilt, in particular among those who will be working closely with the REU program. The questions after each area title are intended to give you a sense of the types of research questions that are pursued within each subject area. Mentored research projects within the REU program are likely to ask a narrower set of questions that fall under these large umbrella questions. And most students will make use of data that is identified by faculty mentors to pursue their independent research projects within one of these areas. When you apply, we will ask you to indicate your interest in one of these areas. You don't have to have a specific project in mind, but by telling us the general area that you're interested in, we'll be able to begin the process of matching admitted students to faculty mentors. To support students' progress on the research projects and build skills that are transferable, program participants will engage in skills-based seminars on research design, on scientific inference, statistical analysis, and programming or coding in statistical software platforms, and reading groups. And I want to emphasize that you're not expected to come into the program already knowing how to code and analyze quantitative data. If you have some experience, that is great. Please let us know in the application. But if you do not, that's not a problem. Indicate what classes and capacities and motivations leave you prepared to learn from these seminars and then apply those new skills in a research project. This slide here summarizes what you'll experience while you're on our campus. This is a mentored research experience, provides you an opportunity to work on your own project and also an opportunity to assist with faculty research so that you can gain experience as a research assistant. This is a structured program that consists of career panels, weekly dinners, various seminars, and research groups. So if you're admitted into the program, you'll come here for 8 weeks and you will have a structured schedule that contains sort of all these items on this menu organized into different sessions each day and each week as we proceed through the program. While in the program, participants have the opportunity to engage closely with the 3 REU directors. So that's Professor Ritter, myself, and Professor Sharice Thrower, who was not able to be here today, but is our 3rd co-director. The students will also engage with various faculty members in the political science department. And this list, that's the second bullet on this slide, gives you a sense of the roster for the summer 2023 program, but that list will change yearly as faculty in the political science department at Vanderbilt sort of move in and out of being closely involved in the REU program. The program also involves mentoring from graduate students who are pursuing their PhDs in political science here at Vanderbilt. The program participants also themselves constitute a group of individuals that you would be interacting with. It's a small cohort of about 10 individuals each summer. And finally, the program will connect participants to individuals at partner institutions, such as faculty and researchers who engage in a career panel, for example. Now, let's think about how these experiences translate into output. In other words, what will you gain? So participants in the REU will gain research and communication skills. They will gain a paper that may serve as the foundation for an honors thesis or for postgraduate applications. They will gain guidance in the pursuit of research-oriented careers that come through. So guidance in the pursuit of research-oriented careers that will come through engagement in the program itself, but also in a network that is established under the program and will carry on for individuals into the future. Now, who is eligible for an REU experience? At this point in time, our REU is supported entirely by the U.S. National Science Foundation. That support requires that participants are U.S. citizens, nationals, or permanent residents. You must be an undergraduate student during the program. So in other words, you cannot graduate in May of this year or June of this year and enroll in the program. You do not need to have experience, just interest and motivation. And finally, we're interested in bringing in a diverse group. And that means that if you're interested in this program, then we're really interested in you applying to the program. So how do you apply? To apply, you'll access the portal for an online application on our website. Professor Ritter dropped the website into the chat. You can find it there if you haven't found it already. This slide here lists the required application materials. And I just want to flag two things. First, we want to see a writing sample. That writing sample can be any paper that you've written for a class or for a research experience. It can be on any topic. So it does not have to be a political science paper. We want to see how well you write and how well you reason as evidence of how prepared you are to engage in a summer program like this one. Second, for letters of recommendation, these should come from two people who know your academic potential. This could be a faculty member or two faculty members. It could be a supervisor. You may have done an internship and want to ask that supervisor for a letter of recommendation. That's absolutely fine. So the letters of recommendation do not need to be only from faculty members, but they should be from people who can speak to the types of skills and motivation that are needed for this program. You do not want to ask family members or friends. Try to stick to people who can evaluate you along a professional dimension. The deadline for this summer's program is February 6th of 2023, and we expect to make decisions by the end of March. And with that, we have concluded the presentation that we have for you today, and we're very happy to open it up for questions, which you can ask by unmuting yourself and jumping in. You can raise your hand and we'll call on you, or you can throw your questions into the chat and we will watch that as well.
Hannah, how can we help you?
Hi, I was wondering what specific traits you look for in students that are applying to the REUs. Also, let me know if you can hear me. I'm sorry, I have a fan going right now.
No, you can hear you. That sounds great. So Liz talked about this a little bit, but we are looking for people who are really interested in research, right? Are excited to have opportunities to answer questions and develop tools for answering research questions. So tell us what, in your application, you should tell us what kinds of things you really like thinking about or talking to people about when it comes to political science. Like, what are the things that you really want to dig into and take more courses on, those kinds of things. So I think that there's there's not a specific trait that we're looking for. We're not looking for a certain GPA. We're not looking for a certain profile of courses. We're trying to see if you're suited for, if you really want to learn about research and political science in particular. Iris asks in the chat, is preference given to students currently majoring in political science? And the answer is no, there's not going to be a preference for one major or another. So you can have degrees in other areas if you can show us in your application, whether that's answering questions or something like that. Some of the statement of purpose questions, you can tell us why you want to do an REU in political science, despite the fact that your major is something else, but that's entirely fine.
I can take the next question. This is, I'm not sure from the question whether or not you're referring to the personal statement for your statement that you give to us for the REU program or for a PhD program, but I'm going to give a general answer that's sort of applicable to both, which is, we want to know how interested you are and prepared you are to pursue a program of study in research, in social science research. So one thing that happens sometimes when people think about political science as something they'd like to pursue in their postgraduate time, say in a PhD program, is they often think that they need to demonstrate a love of politics. And I can tell you that many of us up and down the halls in a political science department do not love politics. It's okay, we're fine if you do love politics, that's great. But what we want to see is that you're really interested in research and that you're interested in skill building around research. You're interested in refining the ways that you approach and ask questions of social science dynamics out there in that world of politics. So you might want to start by telling us why you're interested in pursuing this program. What experiences have you had that prepare you for this program? And I think those are the two core things, but maybe Professor Ritter can jump in and I had my hand on my third finger, so I'm not sure if there was a third bullet that we should mention there.
I mean, I've seen lots of different kinds of personal statements for PhD applications, and I think that a lot of the same things would demonstrate your interest, right? So we've had people who served in the military and tell us about the experiences that they had that they wanted to try and understand more about, or people who grew up under certain experiences, like they grew up in a rural area or they grew up in one way or another that makes them feel a disjoint between what they've experienced and what they see in others when it comes to politics. So you can highlight your interest in political science or political questions, even if you're not interested in politics themselves, right? And I think that there are lots of ways to demonstrate that. Bridget asks, what kind of reference letters do you need? So I will say that our REU site, the web page, when you go to the apply link at the top, we list some of the things that you want your recommenders to speak to, right? Like whether you're going to be successful in different kinds of ways. Do you work with teams? Do you work well on your own? Do you are you somebody that is responsible? And so you should ask people who can speak to those questions that we've listed on our website. And in fact, I seem to have lost it now, my own website. Okay, here it is. So yeah, you'll see on this that we ask your references to discuss your capacity for communication, your analytical reasoning and research, your level of professionalism, and where they think you can best grow through an REU project. And so you should ask people who can speak to that. And if that is faculty advisors or people who have had you in their class, then that's great. If it's a supervisor for somebody you interned for or worked for, then that's great too. We just would not prefer to see letters from close friends and family. do we prioritize students who are closer to graduation? Would you be at a disadvantage if you have not completed your first year of undergraduate? So the only thing that we can't do is we can't admit you once you are graduated. But we don't have a particular prioritization rule as far as how far along you are in school. I do think that in practice, we may lend ourselves towards people who are raising seniors or raising juniors because they may be better able to execute a research project, but that's not necessarily always the case. So you should certainly apply. You should also know that we're going to offer this program, we're funded for 3 years at least, and maybe more beyond that. And so there are, even if you don't get in your first year, as long as you're still eligible next year, you're very welcome to apply. And there's no cost to apply, right? There's no cost, there's no fee for sending in an application.
Yeah, I would just jump in and underscore that we can only accept 10 funded students this summer, students who are funded through the National Science Foundation support. So it may be that there are many qualified applicants that have to get turned down. So if you'd apply and you're turned down, please do not take that as some sign that we would not want you to reapply the next year. We're just going to be limited in the number of slots that we have. On applications, someone asks, will we be reviewing applications on a rolling basis or once the application process closes? We have access to your applications before the application process or before it closes, but we will not begin to formally evaluate the applications until that deadline passes. Likewise, if the deadline passes and your application is not in there, we may miss the opportunity to evaluate your application. So do get your applications in there on time. I'm going to go back to the question on whether or not an interest in questions related to international development with countries outside the US would fit under conflict and cooperation. That's probably the best home for it. If you are interested in that topic, but from the perspective of domestic political institutions in other countries. So, for example, I direct LawPop Lab, which works a lot with the United States Agency for International Development. So we're in this international development space, but we're considering questions that are domestic in countries around the Americas, looking, for example, at intentions to emigrate out of Central America and what are some of the factors that are fueling individuals' motivations to leave the Northern Triangle countries. So if that's the perspective that you're interested in, then you would want to jump into the area that we have that's related to Latin American development issues. If you're interested in this more from an international relations perspective, then conflict and cooperation.
I will also say to that is that when you apply, we ask you to choose your first preferred program, but you can also list a second and you can also, and then you can list a third. And if what you say in your personal statement doesn't quite match what you've chosen as your first choice project, that's okay. And we'll figure it out when you get here, right? Well, we'll make sure that you're paired with the right mentor for the project. Kate's question, what will the dynamic be like between faculty and students? How much guidance will students have on their research? So the way that we've designed the program is that you'll take classes in most of the mornings where you're doing skill building. You're learning how to set up a research design, how to develop a theory, how to use statistical programming, in the mornings, and then the afternoons are largely left to you to be able to work with your other colleagues, to work with, you can go to office hours being held by graduate students, or you can meet with faculty mentors. And so it's meant to be a very close relationship between faculty and students. It's not a lab structure, it's instead a structure that you're working with faculty pretty closely. They're going to read your work, they're going to help you develop your plan, etc. So you'll get a lot of people able to speak to your research.
Yeah, I'll jump in though and just add that there will be times when you're just working away at your research project. And so we will be looking for people who have the motivation and whose faculty or other letters of recommendation can speak to their ability to work independently as well as in a collaborative learning environment. So we want to see people who are motivated to really engage. I mean, we're looking for nerds, people. We're looking for people who want to spend their summer in class and then conducting independent research, right? So show us that that's what you're interested in, if indeed you are, right? If you're not, this is not the program for you. But we're looking for people who really want to go deep into political science over the summer.
Iris asks, can we find a recording of this Zoom anywhere up today? And absolutely, we're recording it and we're going to post it to the REU website that I linked to earlier. So you should be able to search for Vanderbilt Political Science REU, and we'll have this video on our website so you can watch it again later or share it with others. Hannah asks, I know I'm applying to the REU program with limited experience with internships due to my switching my major late. Is that, no, that's not weighted heavily during the application review. So having an internship isn't going to give one person or another any advantage. It is just a possible way to demonstrate your interests and your abilities. So it could be that an internship is a way to do that. But if you haven't had an internship, you can show us your passions and interests and abilities in other ways, whether it's coursework or your experience with a research project or an RA-ship or anything else. So that won't work against you.
We've run through the list of questions in the chat, but we'll wait a minute or two to see if there are others. I want to
answer your question. Yeah, to raise your hand or to ask them in the chat. And if we missed something in the chat, please make sure you hit us again.
Yeah, please bump it up. I want to note that on the RU website for this program, you'll find an opt-in listserv. We'll be distributing information by way of that listserv from time to time. We will not be using it on a weekly basis, so you don't have to worry about getting inundated by us sending you a lot of mail, but I would encourage you to sign up for it if you're interested in this program. Kaylin, do you want to jump in with your question?
Hi, I previously asked a question regarding to international development. Specifically, I'm kind of curious in sort of like the inner workings of like the United Nations and its impact on different countries. And just I recently took a course about studying the UN and found like that there's like a lot of weaknesses in implementation of policies in different countries. That's just like a topic that I'm interested in, but like following research, would it lean towards more of the conflicts, or would you say like picking specifically through Latin America could study that individual country?
I would say conflict and cooperation is the way to go. That's kind of the area that I tend to work in, and I've done quite a bit of work on the UN and its different organizations and treaties, and so like I could be well suited to mentor you on that area, and we have others who could do that as well. So I would say that conflict and cooperation that's very strongly an IR type question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Eric asks if I'm interested in public opinion and voter behavior. Would the public and electoral accountability research area be the best for you? And absolutely, you've got it right on the money.
Unless you're interested in that question in, say, Latin America.
That's true. That's fair.
Like the Latin American track. That's a lot of what I do, but in the Latin American region.
That's right. So the public and electoral accountability is a US centered research area for in this REU. And if you're interested in studying that in Brazil, then you should instead choose regime legitimacy in Latin America. Hi, Dylan.
Hi, I want to apologize. I did not intend on being this late. But I want to know, like, if you have like a summation or kind of like the material, like a briefing or something, I could look over after Zooming is over. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, we're going to
absolutely.
post this video. So
Okay.
this whole meeting and all of the questions that we've answered, we'll post a link to it on the REU's website, which I just have put in the chat. So you should be able to view the whole thing there.
Okay, thank you.
Post the slides separately
Yes, we'll
so
do that.
that you can have a shortcut to all the material.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other lingering questions from faculty or students who are interested? We hope to see applications from all of you. We would be really excited to have you here.
Absolutely. And if you have questions that you haven't had a chance to ask because they haven't occurred to you yet, or you just didn't want to throw them into the discussion today, feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to any of the three co-directors, myself, Professor Ritter, Professor Thrower. We'll be happy to be in touch with you about the REU program.
Mm-hmm. And our information is also on the website under people, so you can see our email addresses and ask us in community. Okay,
Right.
I think we should call it. Thank you so much for coming and for
Thank you,
bringing
everyone.
questions and your curiosity, and we can't wait to see more from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.